Money Sense is brought to you with the support of OneTradeX. OneTradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage. OneTradeX knows there's more than one way to invest. OneTradeX is the Cayman Islands' only fully licensed online broker-dealer, offering discount trading services to individual investors and traders, hedge fund managers, and family offices. OneTradeX has the most competitive online trading prices of any offshore broker worldwide, with no custody or management fees, free demonstration accounts, and no charge to open an account with a $5,000 minimum deposit. Trade stocks, options, futures, bonds, and Forex. Learn more and open your free demo account today at OneTradeX.com. OneTradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage. OneTradeX is licensed to conduct securities investment business by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority.
Live from Radio Cayman Studio, this is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
Good morning, and welcome to Money Sense. I'm your host, Amy Hubble, joined by Emil Kalinowski. We have a fun one planned for you today. We are joined in studio this morning by Megan Ford, a licensed marriage and family therapist who focuses specifically on couples and their relationship with money. Emil, what were you going to call this show?
It was going to be Loveline Meets Finance, or Finance Love.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Megan, welcome to Cayman.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm going to read your full bio because I don't want to miss anything, and I want to make sure that I read it perfectly. But Megan Ford, MSLMFT, is the immediate past president of the Financial Therapy Association and works as the clinic coordinator at the University of Georgia's Aspire Clinic, a holistic environment that offers financial planning students the chance to bring classroom knowledge into the real-world practice by providing pro bono financial services to the community. In addition to pursuing a PhD part-time in financial planning, Megan is both a licensed marriage and family therapist and a practicing financial therapist, a combination that makes her one of the leading experts in all matters involving relationships and money. She is the author of the blog Finding Harmoney, and her thoughts have been featured nationally and internationally in the New York Times, Consumer Reports, CNN Money, USA News and World Reports, BBC, The Cut, NerdWallet, and more. Megan is especially passionate about helping couples find more balance through better understanding both in their individual relationships with money as well as how these money stories impact their relationship dynamics.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Wow. Amy, your bio is just as impressive.
Oh, well, thank you. We were in the same program together. That's how we met. So I'm glad to bring her on.
My bio, my role in this show today will be man. I'm here to represent the other half.
And we're so glad to have that perspective here.
Important.
In the studio.
Important.
Well, Megan, we were talking a little bit before the show and this morning just about how prevalent kind of financial stress is just in general, and especially how that can kind of creep into our relationships. And I know you're talking about some of the stats that are almost just crazy, mind-blowing, is how high financial stressors are to relationship failure.
It's alarming, actually. There are some stats that kind of just take you aback a little bit and really get you to think about how we need to be talking about this issue more. Money is definitely not in the financial industry. We have this familiarity bias around talking numbers, talking money. It's our go-to. But I think so much in the general public and within our intimate relationships, it doesn't feel that way. Money is still a very taboo topic, I think, for some within even their most intimate relationships with family and with their partners. And so that's something that we need to sort of recognize, I think, a little bit more, sit with it and figure out, how maybe we can become a little bit more comfortable. And that's really where Finding Harmoney, the blog that I created, came from, was just trying to introduce or invite more couples to this conversation about, where do my money values and thoughts, patterns, behaviors come from? And it's quite alarming. There was a study that's done every year by the American Psychological Association, and it finds that almost 3/4 of Americans are experiencing financial stress at least some of the time, but nearly 1/4 of us are feeling extreme financial stress.
Has that been rising lately, or is that just a general multi-generational constant?
Yeah, I think it's probably tied to, economic circumstances, individual characteristics. Some could feel more stressed than others, depending on who you are. I think a lot is involved in that experience of stress, but the fact is that it's there and it's real, and people are experiencing it at an individual level. And then if you think about broadening that out to how we're experiencing that within our couple relationships, within our family relationships, sort of really complex. And yeah.
Quick question: Is money one of the big problems when couples come to you? Like, how does it rank with infidelity or substance abuse? Where is it on that ranking? How common is it, I suppose, is my question, as a problem leading to marital couple stress?
No, that's a great question. Well, if you think about it, I mean, money really touches everything that we do, right? None of us are immune. None of us exist in this vacuum where money doesn't touch us or affect us or impact us. And so for couples, there was a study that was done by the Institute of Divorce Financial Analysis. And in the U.S., money issues are responsible for about 22% of all divorces. So cited in that institute's study, 22%. But in experiencing stress within a relationship, couples cite finances as the number one stressor. If they cite that they're experiencing stress in a relationship, they attribute that stress, the number one cause, to money, to finances. So again, just, it really does make a big difference.
What's an example of stress? So we're talking general stress, but what is an example? Is it that somebody's spending too much money, or that we don't know where all the money is?
All of the above. I think those are two great examples. What would you see in your practice, Amy?
Yeah, I mean, I think even as you were talking about earlier, when we're talking about kind of when that conversation happens, I think a lot of times that conversation doesn't happen as early as it really should. Even when we're in a dating relationship, and it's kind of like we don't even start to talk about it until we're really on down the road towards marriage or living together or something of that nature, where you're almost being forced to talk about money versus really when you should be talking about it earlier. And I think you were talking about maybe some stats that was saying that a lot of people prefer to either date or be in a relationship with somebody that shares those same values.
Yes, yeah. There was another study that talked about how we're really attracted to, we say that we're really attracted to in another person, someone who can manage money well, who can budget.
Of course.
Yeah, and I think that's, sort of idealized, but when we're talking about the reality of the situation, how many people are very much on top of that in their lives, I don't think that the ideal meets the actual reality. And so expectations then, we're disappointed maybe when we engage with others in a relationship and they're not good.
So we are looking for someone who can manage their finances, who can budget.
Yeah.
We admit that, but then what's the disconnect? Something happens.
Yeah, I usually don't bring that up on my first dates necessarily. Like, well, maybe I should. How much money do you make?
Dating.
What's your credit score?
Amy has a checklist.
Right.
I bring highlighters.
I mean, I do tend to talk about money on my first dates just for what I do for a living. They tend to ask me. But
Yeah.
I think there's a dating site in the U.S. that
There is.
matches based on credit score.
Yes,
my goodness.
you're right. I don't know how popular or successful it's been, but it exists. So I think people, they idealize that in others, but I don't know how much fundamentally people are sticking to those ideals all the time.
Yeah.
So that makes it problematic.
What about that idea of money personalities? As far as some people, money causes more stress than it causes in other people. And especially if you're in a relationship with somebody that money does not cause them stress, but it causes you stress.
Right.
How is that going to manifest itself on down the road, especially if you're kind of avoiding ever talking about it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key. It's that there's this lack of communication, and because money feels like a taboo topic to still many of us, it reduces our ability to talk through it on an intimate level in a way that really benefits the relationship long term. If we're skirting around that conversation, if we're avoiding that conversation from the very beginning, we kind of start to, even as the relationship gets more serious, we start to just unconsciously fall into patterns with our partners around money. If Amy is the partner that really likes talking money, doesn't feel very stressed by it, feels very confident in her level of management with her finances.
Probably true.
Yeah. I mean, it's a realistic example. But say her partner doesn't, it's going to be harder for Amy to understand maybe that perspective of her partner because she's in her own head. She's in her own experiences about her comfort level. And so really it's about coaching clients, couples, to find more capacity to understand one another's histories, because we come into relationships with money baggage.
Yeah,
as I like to call it.
Absolutely.
$500 euro notes, actually. But
not ones that fit in the overhead, ones that you have to check.
You have to check those
Absolutely.
bags.
I see you were making an analogy, not literally bags of money. I see. My mistake.
No, and back to my practice, I think usually, even when I'm dealing with couples, one of the couple is usually dragging the other couple in. There's usually one that's really driving it. And even some of the conversations we'll have a good meeting, and then I'll feel like I'll have a good understanding for how it's working, and then they'll come in, or I'll get an email 10 minutes later and like, they didn't say this or didn't say this, but I want you to know this, and they need to know this, and you need to tell them to do that. And that's where I really throw up the flag about you guys are not communicating, you're not on the same page about it.
Right, exactly. And I think that starts to formulate very early on in the relationship if you don't start talking about it from the beginning.
It sounds like communication is the key in identifying what each person is comfortable with and being part of the process. Because I think, Amy, once you sent me a study that talked about it doesn't matter whether it's the man or the woman that's in charge of the finances, but just later the problem becomes the person, whoever's not in charge, loses track and becomes intimidated, and then should anything ever happen to the relationship, it's very
they become
stressful,
vulnerable,
or even vulnerable, or
Yes.
even if nothing happens, maybe they feel uncomfortable. So it's just
still vulnerable because they're
taken
not
advantage
in
of.
the know. Yeah, it's very important, I think, for couples to be on the same page. Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question before we need to take a break. But what do you think is the number one thing that, and we'll come back to this after the break, that couples need to start putting into their lives to facilitate that conversation?
I think it's shared agreement on time and working as a partnership. Really finding an opportunity to sit down and force yourself, I think, sometimes to have these talks. So making time for it.
Yeah, making time it would definitely be the hardest. Well, we're going to take a short break, but stay with us. In 60 seconds, we will continue our conversation on all matters of love and money with Megan Ford.
One TradeX knows there's more than one way to invest. One TradeX is the Cayman Islands' only fully licensed online broker-dealer, offering discount trading services to individual investors and traders, hedge fund managers, and family offices. One TradeX has the most competitive online trading prices of any offshore broker worldwide, with no custody or management fees, free demonstration accounts, and no charge to open an account with a $5,000 minimum deposit. Trade stocks, options, futures, bonds, and Forex. Learn more and open your free demo account today at OneTradeX.com. OneTradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage. OneTradeX is licensed to conduct securities investment business by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority.
This is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands and sponsored by One TradeX.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back. In the second half of today's show, we're going to continue our conversation on love and money with Megan Ford, couples financial therapist. Megan, welcome back.
Thank you. It's been fun so far.
Yeah. And before this break, we were talking about kind of the effect of financial stress on our relationships. Do you have any just good horror stories from your practice that
I'm cringing.
will make us all feel better?
Well, as a couples financial therapist, I mean, I think for the most part, you're seeing the problem end. You're seeing people who are deeply entrenched in some of these problems and these issues. So I don't know if there are significant ones that truly stick out, but I do remember one that really has stuck with me. I was working with a young couple who had been together for about 2 years. They were approaching marriage. We were doing some premarital counseling. And part of my process was to ask these couples who are entering this new phase of their relationship about money. And when I introduced a couple of just basic questions to them, they were visibly just very uncomfortable. And so, of course, piqued my curiosity, and I had to ask a bit further about that. And it was that, they were six weeks from their wedding date, and neither of them knew or understood anything about one another's financial life.
They've never asked each other about this.
They had never
been
asked
together for
one
2
another.
years.
They had never asked one another. I mean, they knew what one another did for a living, but in terms of how much do you make per year? What's your annual income? What kind of benefits do you receive? Do you have a mountain of debt maybe hidden here in this circumstance? And what am I marrying into? And I think that's a really, again, it harkens back to what we've been talking about more open, transparent communication.
Yeah, it's probably more prevalent than we realize.
Mm-hmm.
I could imagine the shock or the betrayal of finding out once you're married after the fact, oh, by the way, this person earns tens of thousands of dollars less, or they have tens of thousands of dollars of more debt. Which brings me to kind of a broader philosophical question. Are there any innate differences, ladies? In your practice, you see men and women. Are there any innate differences between men and women when it comes to finances? For example, let's say, is there a competition within the couple to see who can earn more? I would guess that women would be comfortable, just generalizing, that they would be comfortable earning more or less. But I bet the majority of men would be uncomfortable earning less. Is there anything that in your practices that you've seen that says, men are from Mars and women are from financial Venus? Is there something like that?
No, I think that's a great question. I think dynamics are shifting. Social trends, coupleship is different than it was, 50 years ago. So a lot of dynamics are changing. So that means a lot of variability, I think, among couples and how they would see that.
It seems like the millennials are more open and more equal and team-oriented than previous generations. So I could see how that would cross gender boundaries as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think men and women tend to be socialized a little bit differently when it comes to money. We learn and we maybe emphasize different things unconsciously. Even as parents teaching our children about money, you might introduce something without even realizing it differently to your daughter versus your son. So there's some interesting things around how we socialize men and women about money, and then that carries forward into our adult intimate relationships. We, again, part of that money baggage, we bring that forward.
Yeah, and that's, I definitely, while we don't want to necessarily acknowledge that is the case, I do think a lot of boys are socialized that you need to take care of your family, where that's not necessarily what's emphasized to your daughter, going back to just kind of how money has always been looked at. In general, in my practice, men tend to be a little more risk tolerant than women, which sometimes I think just lends itself to having more experience with it or more expectation that they're going to need it going forward. But I also think you're right, Emil, that younger people tend to, in a younger generation, women are working much more than they were in previous generations. Women are making more money and now contributing to the family from both a financial side and the rest of the things that we've always done from the beginning of time.
Yeah.
So it is a shifting dynamic. But I think going back to kind of your practice and what you see, do you see a lot of couples where one couple is kind of hiding something from the other couple or the other partner?
Yeah, I think there's some that could be an impetus for why we're coming to talk more about money in our relationship. If there's some secret keeping, something that we often now refer to as financial infidelity, any sort of hiding or cheating with money. Yeah.
What would that mean? What's an example?
Emil's ears have perked up now.
It sounds exciting. What would that be? What would that be?
It's not as thrilling as it sounds, actually, to the couple dynamic. Well. It's very treacherous. It can be very dangerous. Because it really does complicate that trust in the relationship and how someone handles their finances, especially if you're joining together those resources.
So back to infidelity. Financial infidelity, would that mean I am spending money on another woman, or no, I'm making big purchases without talking to my partner first?
Both examples of financial infidelity, right? Yeah, if you're using joint funds in a way that's secretive or hasn't been discussed, or that could be to the detriment of the partnership. So basically, just hiding purchases. It could be a secret bank account, but there's a very broad definition of financial infidelity, and it will depend on the couple and their level of sensitivity around. You didn't tell me that you spent $50 here or there. And this is something that might be very true on the island, too, because of the cost of living here.
Yes, being relatively new to the island, I've noticed that it's slightly more expensive to live here than in the middle of the U.S.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, you can think about it as, just any kind of deception or inadvertent not telling to the other partner of spending. And that could be on a very small scale, or that could be on a big scale. Like, I've got secret investment accounts that are mine that you don't know about. So, right, it can cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, we always say, more money, more problems. But, there's also...
The notorious BIG.
Of course.
Would be
there's also less money, more problems, too. And that's... I think especially when you live in a very expensive place here, I mean, I think, are there different problems that you see in couples that don't struggle with money as much as people that really is something that they're struggling with day to day and is going to be a constant stress? Do they deal with that differently? Do they fight about it differently? Do they commit financial infidelity differently?
I don't necessarily think that there are a ton of differences, but there are some studies that show that couples who make less end up, with an elevated level of financial stress, which then creates or kind of bounces back and forth between relationship stress and financial stress. There's that two-way street. They impact one another. So I don't know if there are significant differences in the way that couples who perhaps do have a more comfortable lifestyle, I don't think they differ so much from couples who don't make as much. But we'll have to do that's. I'll put that on my research list.
and I, as you were talking, something else occurred to me, and I already know the answer to this, but I'm gonna, for the benefit of our listeners, is there one way that's best for couples to manage their money as far as is it one joint bank account? Is there kind of one joint bank account and two separate bank accounts? Is there one way that tends to work better for some people versus other people?
No. That's a big misconception.
That's what I thought you might say.
It's a big misconception that you need to do it one way or another way. It really does involve you kind of sitting down, understanding what's most comfortable for you as partners. And again, looking at that past perspective of what did I learn growing up? What was that like? How did I learn how to do this? And talking with your partner about that same thing. How did they learn how to, maybe they thought that separate bank accounts were, that was just like terrible for their relationship. Maybe they learned that growing up. So you just have to understand the perspective of the other and then make a decision about how it's going to work best for you.
Yeah. How do you facilitate that conversation with people when they ask that, as far as how do you help them to decide?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really just engaging them in some of those questions about their past. What did you see your parents doing? What do you think is important for the two of you? How would you like to see your dynamic? And then having both partners sort of listen to one another's perspectives. Oftentimes in financial therapy, as a couple's financial therapist, it's really just helping them engage in these conversations that they've never learned how to have. They don't know how to ask the question because it can feel very awkward.
Is there an icebreaker? Is there a classic icebreaker that you bring up?
I don't have a classic icebreaker. Maybe I should.
Is that magic question?
We'll have to talk about that more after the show. We'll
Absolutely.
have to brainstorm.
Well, what are some tips just some quick takeaways that couples or individuals can take away from what you've said, and just even to start moving down the path to greater awareness of their spending, greater awareness of that need for communication? What are some good starting points for them?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest things that I harp on is discuss early and discuss often, and we've talked about that throughout the show today. Just making sure that you start these conversations, as early as you can. It doesn't necessarily have to be that first date checklist that Amy goes through, but you do have to have some
There's
opportunities
a joke there
somewhere.
But we're running out of time in this show. Tune in next time for the joke.
Yes, exactly. Discuss early, discuss often. Be on the same team. Try and work as a partnership. Develop some conjoint goals. And sometimes I really like to suggest to couples who are really struggling with, what do we do with this extra leftover money, or they have opposite money personalities. One's more of a spender, one's more of a saver. Create a no questions asked slush fund. Agree on the amount that you want to go into it every single month, but then no questions asked. You do whatever you want with that $100 or that $25, and that reduces some of the stress that maybe couples with different opposite personalities might feel, some of that tension.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, sadly, we are out of time. I know we could talk about this all day. But Megan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Money Sense. Thank you for agreeing to give up an hour of your vacation to be with us today. It's something that I feel very passionate about. It's something I definitely want to see my clients and people around me making sure that they are having those communications around how they're budgeting or how they're spending, and so they can ultimately be successful. You know, relationships are hard enough, I know, without without that extra stress, and I want them to ultimately be successful in how they invest for their future.
Absolutely.
As a final note, we wish to thank our sponsors, One TradeX and the CFA Society of the Cayman Islands, and remind our listeners that a rebroadcast of today's show can be heard as a podcast on the CFA Society Cayman Islands webpage, and encourage anyone who has a question or topic they wish us to cover to please tweet us at @MoneySenseRadio and join the conversation. With that, thanks again, and please do listen again to Money Sense in 2 weeks' time.